We've come a long way with how we store food. I still remember when getting a refrigerator was a big deal. It felt like a little miracle right in the kitchen. Something that kept milk from going bad, leftovers from spoiling, and fruits looking fresh. And for most of us, that habit stuck. If in doubt, put it in the fridge. That's just how we were taught. But over time, I started learning something surprising. Not everything belongs in there. In fact, some of the most common foods we toss into the fridge without a second thought. Well, they actually suffer in there. Now, I'm not here to scold anyone. Lord knows we've all done it, me included. I've put potatoes in the fridge thinking I was keeping them fresh, only to find they tasted strange later. Or stuck a tomato in there and wondered why it had no flavor on my sandwich the next day. Turns out, the fridge can actually do more harm than good with certain foods. It changes their taste, their texture, and even their nutritional value. And for those of us in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, when taste buds are more sensitive, digestion slows down a bit, and health matters more than ever, that's something worth paying attention to. This isn't about fancy food science or trendy kitchen hacks. This is about making the most of the foods we already love, keeping them flavorful, keeping them healthy, and honestly, getting a little closer to the way our parents and grandparents did things before everything got overcomplicated. We're not reinventing the wheel here, we're just slowing down and being a bit more thoughtful. And sometimes, it's those little changes that make the biggest difference. So if you've ever taken a bite of something and thought, this just doesn't taste like it used to, you're not alone. And if you're managing things like blood pressure, blood sugar, or cholesterol, then how we store our food can actually help more than we realize. My hope is that by the end of this, you'll feel like someone finally explained all this in plain English, no fluff, no fuss, just good old common sense. And hey, before we jump into it, I'd really love to know, which of these foods do you always keep in the fridge? And did you ever suspect they might not belong there? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. You might be surprised how many of us have been doing the same thing for years without realizing it. Now, let's get started, and I promise you're going to look at your fridge a little differently by the end of this. 1. Potatoes. One of the most comforting, familiar foods in the kitchen. Whether you love them mashed, roasted, fried, or baked, potatoes have likely been a part of your meals for decades. They're hearty, filling, and they just feel like home. But here's the thing a lot of folks don't know. Putting potatoes in the refrigerator can quietly ruin them, both in taste and in nutrition. And I want to explain why, not to alarm you, but to help you get the very best out of something you're already eating. Now, if you're like most people I talk to, you probably keep your potatoes in a bottom drawer or even in a bag in the fridge thinking you're keeping them fresh. Feels like the safe thing to do, right? But the cold temperature inside the refrigerator actually starts to mess with the potato's natural makeup. Potatoes are full of starch. That's what makes them soft and fluffy when cooked. But in cold environments, like a fridge, those starches begin to turn into sugar too quickly. It changes how they taste. Instead of that earthy, creamy flavor we expect, you'll start to notice a strange sweetness or a gritty texture. It's subtle at first, but once you notice it, it's hard to ignore. But flavor isn't the only concern here. There's a chemical reaction that can happen when those sugary potatoes are cooked, especially at high heat, like when you're frying or baking. It creates a compound called acrylamide, which has been studied for its potential link to certain cancers. Now, I'm not saying you should panic if you've had a plate of fries, not at all. But it's one of those little things that adds up over time. And as we get older and become more mindful of what we eat, it just makes sense to store things the right way when we can. There's another issue too, moisture. Fridges tend to be humid, and potatoes don't do well with that. They need a dry environment to stay fresh. In the fridge, they start to soften, rot quicker, or develop that musty smell we all dread. It's especially frustrating when you buy a bag and expect it to last a few weeks, only to find mushy, unusable spuds a few days later. So what's the better way? Honestly, it's simple and probably the way your grandmother used to do it. Potatoes prefer a cool, dark, dry place. A pantry shelf, a cupboard, or even a wooden crate in the garage can work, as long as it's not too hot or wet. The key is to let them breathe. Skip the plastic bags, those trap moisture. Instead, go for a mesh sack, a paper bag, or a basket, something with ventilation. And here's a small but important tip. Keep potatoes away from onions. I know it seems convenient to store them together, but onions release gases that cause potatoes to sprout and spoil faster. It's like an invisible fight happening in your kitchen without you even knowing it. One of my old friends, Jack, who's been managing his type 2 diabetes for years, told me he never knew cold-stored potatoes could affect his blood sugar differently. After switching to proper storage, he actually noticed more stable glucose levels after meals. Sometimes, it's those quiet changes that make a world of difference, especially when your health is front and center. So next time you're unpacking groceries, just give those potatoes a better home. Your taste buds and your body will thank you. 2. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are one of those foods we reach for again and again. Sliced onto a sandwich, tossed into a salad, cooked down into a sauce, or even just eaten with a little salt. They're simple, versatile, and if you grew up eating homegrown ones, you know how a truly ripe tomato is supposed to taste. Juicy, slightly sweet, maybe even a little tangy. But somewhere along the way, many of us started doing something that's quietly stealing all that flavor away. Putting our tomatoes in the fridge. Now look, it makes sense on the surface. Tomatoes are soft, they bruise easily, and no one wants to waste food. So we think, better safe than sorry, and pop them in the refrigerator, especially when we're trying to make them last a few more days. But here's the thing, cold air actually shuts down the very process that gives tomatoes their flavor. Tomatoes continue to ripen after they're picked, even the ones from the grocery store. That ripening is what develops the sugars and acids that make a tomato taste like a tomato. But when they're chilled, that natural chemistry is interrupted. The cold air dulls their flavor and changes their texture too. Instead of firm and juicy, you end up with something mealy, mushy, or just flat. It's a small change, but if you've ever taken a bite of a cold tomato and thought, something's missing, well, that's what it was. And it's not just about taste, it's about what your body's getting too. Tomatoes are rich in lycopene, a natural antioxidant that supports heart health, and has been studied for its role in reducing the risk of certain cancers. But lycopene levels actually drop when tomatoes are kept cold. So not only are they less delicious, but they're not doing as much good for you either. And when you're trying to eat smarter, maybe keeping an eye on blood pressure or looking after your heart, that's something to think about. My neighbor Linda, she's in her 70s, used to complain to me all the time, tomatoes don't taste like they used to. When I asked how she was storing them, she said, in the fridge, of course. I told her to try keeping them out, just on the counter, stem side down if possible. A week later, she called me and said, I made a BLT and it actually tasted like a BLT again. That's how quick the change can be. So here's what I recommend. Keep your tomatoes at room temperature, on the kitchen counter, out of direct sunlight. If you're worried about them spoiling too fast, store them stem side down. That helps slow down moisture loss. Let them ripen naturally. If they're a little firm when you bring them home, just give them a few days. They'll soften up and sweeten on their own. Now, if your tomato is already fully ripe and you know you won't get to it for a day or two, it's okay to pop it in the fridge briefly. But, and this is important, take it back out and let it return to room temperature before eating it. That little bit of warmth brings back more of the flavor and texture than you'd expect. At the end of the day, it's not about rules or restrictions. It's about honoring the food and getting what you paid for, the full flavor, the full nutrition, the full experience. And in our later years, when food becomes as much about comfort as it is about health, that matters more than ever. 3. Onions. Let's talk about onions. These little guys are the quiet workhorses of almost every kitchen. You might not think about them much, but they show up in everything: soups, stews, sauces, sautés. Sometimes they're the base of a dish, other times they're just there to round out the flavor. But either way, they matter. And if you're someone who loves home cooking or just appreciates a well-seasoned meal, how you store your onions can make a bigger difference than you might think. Now here's the thing. Onions and refrigerators don't get along. I know it seems like a natural spot. It's cool, it's clean, and we're all trying to make our food last a little longer. But onions are a different story. They're full of natural sugars and starches, and when they're put into a cold, damp space like a fridge, those sugars start breaking down in all the wrong ways. You might have noticed this already. Your onions get soft faster, maybe even slimy. The flavor starts to change too. Instead of that sharp, clean bite that gives your dishes depth, the onion becomes oddly sweet or just off. And once that starts, it's hard to come back from. Even worse, the fridge traps moisture. And onions don't like moisture. That extra dampness is what causes mold and rot to set in early. But wait, it gets more annoying. Onions have a strong smell, as we all know. That smell is fine when it's sizzling in a pan with garlic. But in your fridge, it spreads fast. I've had people tell me their butter tasted funny, their fruit had a weird aftertaste, even their milk seemed off. All because a couple onions were sitting in the crisper drawer. And trust me, no one wants to drink onion-scented coffee in the morning. I made this mistake myself years ago. Tossed a few onions in the fridge thinking it'd help them last through the week. My wife opened the fridge one morning and asked, "Why does the milk taste like soup?" Took us 2 days to figure out the onion smell had made its way into everything. Even sealed containers weren't safe. After that, I never made that mistake again. So what's the better option? Store your onions in a cool, dry, well-ventilated space. A pantry shelf, a basket in the kitchen, even a mesh bag hanging in the garage if it's not too hot or humid. The key is airflow, let them breathe. Don't keep them in plastic bags. Plastic traps moisture, and moisture is the enemy here. Paper bags, mesh sacks, or an open bowl work great. Also, keep them away from potatoes. I know it seems convenient to keep all your root veggies together, but potatoes release a gas that makes onions spoil faster, and vice versa. It's like a quiet kitchen feud happening behind closed doors. Now, if you've already peeled or chopped an onion and want to save the rest, then it's okay to put it in the fridge, but only if you wrap it really well. Airtight container, plastic wrap, something that keeps that smell from sneaking out and turning your fridge into an onion-scented disaster zone. Why does this all matter more as we age? Because for many of us, food becomes more than just fuel. It's memory, it's comfort, it's care. The smell of onions in the kitchen might remind you of Sunday dinners or your mother's cooking. But if the onion's no good, if it's gone soft or lost its edge or messed with the rest of your food, it throws the whole experience off. And let's be honest, at this stage in life, we've earned the right to expect better. We know how things are supposed to taste. We've spent decades getting it just right. So let's not let a fridge full of soggy onions steal that away from us. For garlic. Now let's have a little heart-to-heart about garlic. This tiny, humble bulb has probably been with you through decades of meals. Maybe you used it in Sunday pasta sauce, maybe in slow-cooked stews, or maybe, if you're like my father-in-law, you've even chewed a raw clove or two in your day for your heart. Garlic isn't just an ingredient. It's tradition. It brings warmth, depth, and yes, a bit of boldness to everything it touches. But here's something not everyone knows. Putting garlic in the refrigerator is the fastest way to ruin it. I know, the fridge seems like the logical place. You buy a bulb, don't use it all at once, and want to make it last. But garlic doesn't need the cold to stay fresh. In fact, the fridge messes with it in all the wrong ways. When garlic is kept cold, it starts to sprout. You'll notice little green shoots popping out of the cloves, and maybe you've seen that before and thought, "Ah well, no big deal." But those sprouts are bitter. They change the flavor. Suddenly, instead of that warm, rich taste you expect, your garlic starts to have a sharp, almost unpleasant edge. And if you're trying to make a subtle sauce or a comforting soup, that bitterness really throws things off. Worse yet, the moisture inside a fridge encourages garlic to go soft, grow mold, or spoil entirely. A once firm clove turns rubbery or mushy, and before you know it, you're tossing it out. Garlic should be dry, firm, and almost a little papery. The fridge takes all of that away. And we're not just talking about flavor here. Garlic is good for your health, especially in older age. Compounds like allicin, which form when you crush or chop garlic, have been linked to lowering blood pressure and supporting heart health. But those compounds are strongest when garlic is stored right and used fresh. Cold, wet storage? It weakens the potency. It's like watering down your medicine. Let me tell you something personal. My father-in-law, 85 years old and sharp as ever, has eaten raw garlic almost daily since his 40s. He keeps his bulbs in a little clay jar with holes in it for airflow, sitting right on the kitchen counter. He swears by it. His doctor is always shocked by how good his numbers are. And whether it's the garlic or just clean living, There's something to be said for the old ways. So how should you store garlic? Simple. Keep it dry, keep it ventilated, and keep it out of the fridge. A basket on the counter, a mesh bag in the pantry, or a ceramic garlic keeper all do the trick. The key is airflow. Garlic wants to breathe. No plastic bags, no sealed containers, no cold. Just let it live like it was meant to. Now, if you've already peeled or chopped the garlic, okay, then you can refrigerate it, but only for a short while and only in a sealed container. Better yet, if you've chopped extra, use it soon. Garlic starts to lose its punch the moment it's cut, and storing it too long turns it dull or even rancid. At our age, flavor matters more than ever. We've cooked enough meals to know when something's right, and we deserve food that still lights up the taste buds. So don't let a cold fridge steal that from you. 5. Avocados. This creamy, buttery fruit has taken over breakfast toast, salads, and even smoothies. There's something so comforting about a perfectly ripe avocado. It's smooth, it's rich, and it's almost like a little bowl of sunshine that elevates any meal. But here's the thing, avocados are high maintenance. If you've ever opened one, only to find the flesh turning brown and mushy, you know the struggle. So, let's talk about how to treat this delicate fruit with the care it deserves. You probably know by now that once you slice an avocado, it's like time is against you. The flesh turns brown quickly, and before you know it, your beautifully green avocado is a sad, mushy mess. But it doesn't have to be that way. The key here is slowing down that oxidation process. That's the scientific name for the browning effect. And with a little bit of effort, you can buy yourself some precious extra hours. The best way to prevent browning is to introduce a little acidity. Lemon or lime juice works wonders. A light brush of juice on the flesh of the avocado helps slow down the oxidation and keeps it from turning that unpleasant brown. It doesn't take much, just a small splash will do. It's like giving your avocado a little shield to protect it from the air. Now you can enjoy it just a bit longer without worrying about the dreaded brown mess taking over. And while we're on the subject, here's something many people don't know. Don't store it in the fridge unless it's cut. If you've bought an avocado that's still hard and not quite ripe yet, keep it on the counter at room temperature. Let it ripen naturally. Takes time, but that's how it was meant to be. Putting an avocado in the fridge while it's still hard actually slows down the ripening process. So it might take days longer for it to get that creamy texture we all love. Once your avocado is ripe, that's when the fridge can step in. If you have half an avocado left, wrap it in plastic wrap or store it in an airtight container and pop it in the fridge. You'll have a little extra time, a day or two, before it turns into a mushy mess. But remember, the longer it sits in the fridge, the more the texture will change, so try to use it up quickly. But here's the thing that's going to surprise you. Freezing an avocado is a great option. If you bought a bunch of ripe ones and can't use them all right away, freeze them. Peel and pit them first, then either freeze the halves or mash them up for easy use in smoothies or spreads. Freezing avocado helps maintain its creamy texture, and it's so convenient to have it on hand when you need it. At the end of the day, an avocado isn't just a fruit. It's a delicate little treasure that needs to be treated with respect. We've all seen that perfectly ripe avocado go bad too soon, and it's such a waste. But with a few simple steps, you can extend that deliciousness, save it from the trash bin, and truly enjoy it. 6. Bananas. Bananas. They're such a staple in our kitchens, aren't they? Simple, sweet, and oh so nutritious. You probably grew up eating bananas in smoothies, on cereal, or as a snack on the go. They're easy to peel, packed with potassium, and have a soft, comforting texture. But let me ask you, have you ever put bananas in the fridge? If so, you might have noticed something strange happening. Their skin turns black or brown almost overnight, and you might have wondered, are they still good? Well, let's talk about this. Bananas, unlike many fruits, don't really thrive in the cold. Bananas are tropical fruits, and they love warmth. So, when you put them in the fridge, they don't handle it well. The cold environment slows down their natural ripening process, and that's why you'll see their skins darken. But here's the twist. The inside of the banana isn't actually spoiled. It's just still not ripe. The banana might look overripe on the outside, but when you bite into it, it'll be firm, starchy, and not sweet. It's almost like it's stuck in time, unable to ripen properly. This phenomenon is known as chilling injury. The cold damages the banana cells, and no matter how long you leave them out at room temperature, they won't fully recover. This is especially important to consider if you or someone in your family is managing digestive issues or prefers their bananas on the softer, sweeter side. When bananas ripen naturally, they become easier to digest and more satisfying for those with sensitive stomachs. So, letting them ripen on their own is key. Now, let's get into the best way to store bananas. If your bananas are still green or firm, the best place to keep them is on the counter at room temperature. Give them space to ripen naturally. It might take a couple of days, but that's the way nature intended. And let me tell you, the texture and taste when they're allowed to ripen properly is worth the wait. You'll get that perfect, creamy sweetness that makes a banana such a satisfying snack. But what if your bananas are ripening too fast, and you can't eat them all at once? That's where the freezer comes in. You can freeze bananas to prevent them from going to waste. Peel them first, slice them if you like, and store them in an airtight container or a plastic bag. Then, whenever you need them, you've got them ready for smoothies, baking, or even mixing into your oatmeal. Bananas freeze incredibly well, and the texture stays perfect for recipes, so don't be afraid to pop them in the freezer when they're just a little too ripe for your liking. So, the moral of the story is, keep bananas at room temperature, let them ripen at their own pace, and if you've got too many, freeze them for later use. Don't let the fridge ruin their natural ripening process. By following this simple advice, you can enjoy the perfect banana, whether it's for breakfast, a snack, or a smoothie. 7. Uncut melons. Watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, and all the juicy varieties in between. They're the fruits we look forward to in the summertime, bursting with hydration and natural sweetness. You know that feeling when you cut into a ripe watermelon, and the pink flesh just bursts with flavor? It's a delight that makes summer feel even more refreshing. But have you ever wondered if you're storing your melons the right way? Are you getting the full benefit of all that sweetness and nutrition? Well, let's break it down. Here's something many people don't realize. Melons actually keep ripening after they're picked. That's right. Their sweetness and flavor continue to develop even once they're off the vine. And that's where the refrigerator comes in. If you store a whole melon in the fridge before it's fully ripe, you're halting this process. The cold environment stops the melon from continuing to ripen, and as a result, you might end up with a melon that tastes dull, watery, and less flavorful. Let me tell you, watermelons in particular are very sensitive to cold temperatures. If you put a whole watermelon in the fridge, the texture can turn grainy, and the once crisp bite becomes soggy and mushy. Cantaloupes and honeydews are similar. Putting them in the fridge too soon can cause their flesh to become rubbery, and their natural sweetness starts to fade away. That crisp, refreshing bite you crave? It just won't be the same. But it's not just about flavor. Studies have shown that melons stored at room temperature have higher levels of antioxidants, like beta-carotene and vitamin C. These nutrients are key to fighting inflammation, supporting a healthy immune system, and protecting your body as it ages. So, keeping your melon at room temperature actually helps it retain more of those important health benefits. So, what's the best way to store your melon? If you have a whole melon, especially a watermelon, keep it on the counter or in a cool spot, away from direct sunlight. Let it continue to ripen and develop its natural sugars. Once the melon is fully ripe and ready to eat, that's when you can refrigerate it. If you've cut into it, make sure to store it in an airtight container or wrap it tightly with plastic wrap to keep it fresh for a few days. This will help preserve both its flavor and food safety. But, just like with other fruits, it's important to eat it within 3 to 4 days for the best taste and to avoid any safety concerns. If you're concerned about the melon ripening too quickly and you're not able to eat it all at once, you can also freeze melon cubes. Freeze them in a single layer on a baking sheet, and once frozen, transfer them to a bag or airtight container. These frozen melon cubes make a great addition to smoothies or can be eaten as a refreshing snack when you're craving something sweet. To sum it up, room temperature is the key to storing your whole melon until it's fully ripe, and only once it's ready to eat should you store it in the fridge. By following this simple step, you'll get all the natural sweetness, flavor, and nutrients that melons have to offer. After all, melons are meant to be juicy and sweet, not bland and tasteless, right? 8. Bread. Now, let's talk about one of the comfort foods that's been around for ages, bread. There's something about bread, isn't there? Whether it's a warm slice with butter, a sandwich for lunch, or that crispy toast you enjoy in the morning with your coffee, it's just one of those foods that feels like home. It's familiar, comforting, and a staple in most kitchens. But here's the thing, many of us are probably storing our bread the wrong way, and that could be making it go stale way faster than it needs to. Here's the big surprise. Storing bread in the refrigerator actually makes it go stale quicker, not slower. I know it doesn't seem to make sense at first. We've all been taught that cold temperatures preserve things, right? But here's what happens when you put bread in the fridge. There's a process called retrogradation. This is when the starch molecules in the bread start to crystallize. As a result, your once soft, chewy bread turns into a dry, crumbly mess. It doesn't taste good, and it doesn't feel right when you try to eat it. The fridge can also make the outside of the bread soggy, especially if the bread is sliced or exposed to air. At the same time, the inside of the bread becomes tough and flavorless. If you've ever had soggy bread that's tough to chew, you know what I'm talking about. It's not what you want to bite into in the morning, right? So what's the solution? The good news is, there's a much better way to store your bread that will keep it fresh longer. Here's what you should do. If you plan to eat the bread within a few days, store it at room temperature in a cool, dry place. A bread box or a pantry works great. Keep the bread in its original wrapper or a paper bag with a loose seal. This allows the bread to breathe without drying out too quickly. If the bread is in an airtight bag, it can trap moisture and make it soggy. Now, if you have more bread than you can eat in a few days, freezing is your best option. Freezing bread keeps it fresh far longer than refrigeration. But here's a little trick. Slice the bread before freezing it, if it's not already sliced. That way, you can take out just the amount you need without having to thaw the whole loaf. When you're ready to eat it, you can toast it or warm it up in the oven, and it'll taste almost like it just came out of the bakery. It's a perfect solution to avoid waste and always have fresh bread on hand. And here's one more thing, if you want to revive slightly stale bread, there's a trick for that too. Simply sprinkle the bread with a little water, wrap it in aluminum foil, and pop it in the oven for about 10 minutes. It'll get warm, crisp, and delicious once again. It's like giving your bread a second chance. If you want your bread to stay fresh and tasty, don't store it in the fridge. Keep it at room temperature in a cool, dry place, or freeze it for long-term storage. By following these simple tips, you can make sure every slice of bread you eat is as fresh and flavorful as the first. 9. Honey. Honey is one of those foods that feels like it holds a bit of magic, doesn't it? From its sweet, smooth texture to its rich, golden color, honey is not just a sweetener. It's a natural treasure. In fact, it's been around for thousands of years, used not only in cooking but also for its healing properties. Archaeologists have even found pots of honey in ancient Egyptian tombs that are still perfectly edible after thousands of years. Isn't that incredible? But, despite its long shelf life, there's a little mistake that many of us make when it comes to storing honey. Putting it in the refrigerator. You might be thinking, well, it's a liquid, so keeping it in the fridge will help preserve it, right? The truth is, that's not the case. When you put honey in the fridge, it begins to crystallize faster. This means that your once smooth, runny honey can turn thick, grainy, and sometimes even almost solid. Not only does it change the texture, but it also takes away from the lovely floral notes and the delicate sweetness that honey is known for. So, while it's still safe to eat, it's not as enjoyable as it could be. But that's not all. Storing honey in the fridge can also lead to moisture getting into the jar, especially if the lid is not sealed properly. And that moisture can lead to fermentation. While this is rare, it's definitely something we want to avoid. You don't want your honey to go bad just because it's been stored incorrectly, right? So, how should you store honey? The best place for honey is actually in your cupboard. Keep it at room temperature, away from sunlight and heat. You don't need to refrigerate it, and you certainly don't need to do anything fancy. Just store it in a tightly sealed container to make sure no moisture can get in, and that's it. A dark glass jar or a stainless steel container works well because it helps protect the honey from light, which can cause it to lose some of its beneficial properties over time. Now, don't worry if your honey has already crystallized. It's completely natural for honey to crystallize over time, especially if it's raw honey. If that happens, simply place the jar in a bowl of warm, but not boiling water. Stir it gently, and it'll return to its original golden liquid form. Avoid microwaving it, as that can destroy some of the natural enzymes and beneficial properties that make honey such a powerful food. One last thing to keep in mind: honey has antioxidants, antibacterial properties, and even some anti-inflammatory effects. It can help with digestion, soothe a sore throat, and provide a natural energy boost. So, taking care of it properly is definitely worth the effort. Honey is a wonderful gift from nature, and it's best enjoyed when stored properly. Keep it in a cool, dry place and never put it in the fridge. By following these simple storage tips, you can continue to enjoy honey's sweetness and health benefits for months and even years to come. 10. Olive oil. Olive oil isn't just another kitchen ingredient. It's a staple, a tradition, and for many of us, a symbol of health and flavor. Whether drizzled over a fresh salad, used for sautéing vegetables, or as the base for a Mediterranean dish, olive oil has been cherished for centuries, especially in the Mediterranean regions where it's a cornerstone of daily meals. It's revered for its smooth texture, rich flavor, and health benefits, particularly its heart-healthy monounsaturated fats and antioxidants. But there's a little-known mistake that many people make when it comes to storing this precious oil, and that mistake is putting it in the refrigerator. Now, you might think storing olive oil in the fridge would keep it fresh longer, just like you might with other oils or food items, but it's actually not the best choice for olive oil. Here's why: cold temperatures cause olive oil to solidify. Yes, you've probably seen it. When you put extra virgin olive oil in the fridge, it can become cloudy, thick, and even develop waxy lumps. While it's still safe to use, it becomes harder to pour, harder to cook with, and just isn't as enjoyable to work with. Plus, repeated cycles of cold and warm temperatures can slowly change the oil's flavor, making it less vibrant and fresh over time. But that's not all. When olive oil is stored in the fridge, condensation can form inside the bottle. Even a small amount of moisture can lead to the process of oxidation, which can spoil the oil and make it go rancid much faster. Oxidation happens when the oil is exposed to oxygen and breaks down, losing its flavor and health benefits. This is something we definitely want to avoid, especially with something as valuable as high-quality extra virgin olive oil. So, what's the best way to store your olive oil and keep it in top condition? The answer is simple: keep it at room temperature. Store your olive oil in a cool, dark place, away from the stove, heat, and sunlight. Pantries, kitchen cabinets, or a cupboard work perfectly. The key is to keep it in a tightly sealed container to protect it from exposure to air, which can speed up the oxidation process. If you're using a bottle, try to use a dark glass bottle or stainless steel container, as these materials help shield the oil from light, which can also degrade its quality over time. And no, you don't need to put your olive oil in the fridge to preserve it. That's just a habit that can actually do more harm than good. When stored properly, olive oil can stay fresh for months and sometimes even years. Just make sure it's kept in a stable environment and tightly sealed to maintain its flavor and health benefits. One more thing to remember: extra virgin olive oil has a delicate flavor profile and is packed with beneficial nutrients like antioxidants, vitamins, and healthy fats. That's why it's so important to treat it with care. By storing it correctly, you'll ensure that it stays fresh, flavorful, and ready to add that perfect touch to your dishes. Olive oil is a precious ingredient that deserves better than the fridge. It's much happier when it's stored at room temperature, away from heat, light, and moisture. By following these simple storage tips, you'll be able to enjoy its rich flavor and health benefits for months to come. So next time you're tempted to stick your olive oil in the fridge, remember that the pantry is its true home. Food storage isn't just about keeping your items fresh for as long as possible. It's about treating the food you eat with the respect it deserves. Whether it's your creamy avocados, golden honey, or precious olive oil, each of these everyday foods has its own special needs, and a little extra care can make a big difference in both flavor and nutrition. In our busy lives, it's easy to overlook the little things. But when we slow down and take the time to store our food properly, we unlock the true potential of what we're eating. After all, food is more than just fuel. It's about memories, connections, and nourishing not only our bodies but also our hearts and souls. So, before you reach for that refrigerator door again, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is this food really meant to be kept cold? Are we just following the habits we've picked up along the way? Or is there a better way to store these items to keep them at their best? Remember, the wisdom isn't always in the latest gadgets or techniques. It's often found in the simple traditions we grew up with, the stories we've heard from our grandparents, and the common-sense practices that have been passed down through generations. Now it's your turn. I'd love to hear what you think. Which of these food storage tips surprised you the most? Have you had any experiences with foods going bad too quickly or losing their flavor because of improper storage? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. You might even have your own tips to share that could help others. Thank you for joining me on this journey to better food storage, and remember, every small change you make brings you one step closer to a more delicious, nutritious, and joyful life.